Good morning. Welcome to the Friday edition of LoveBabz, LoveTalk. I'm Babz Rawls-Ivy. And today, guess who's my guest? Guess who's in the hot seat? My friend and co-partner of Criminal Justice Insider, Jeff Grant. So I wanted to talk to Jeff because Jeff has been out there being very vocal about these loans that the government are making to small businesses. And he has a very cautionary tale around that kind of thing. But most importantly, I just wanted to catch up with him because we never get a chance really on Criminal Justice Insider to sort of talk before our guests come on and we do the conversation with our guests. So Jeff in his own right could be a guest on anybody's show. He's quite interesting. And he knows a lot of people in this criminal justice universe. So welcome, Jeff Grant.
Hey, Babz. Yeah, Babz, without doing our Criminal Justice Insider beginning of show, kind of I'm used to it pacing me,
Yes.
and I do have shameless plug right here for a show.
I love, well, you know what? Here's no shame in our game. So anyway, you wrote this really personal, illuminating piece on what got you into trouble. I guess.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst? Like, what was the, before you go into it, was it cathartic writing this out? Did it bring up anything for you? Did you feel like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done this?
Well, this whole moment we're in is bringing up so much stuff. Here's really the backstory. You know my story, and a lot of people out there know my story. And I've written extensively about my white collar crime and my imprisonment, my drug addiction, and my suicide attempt. I mean, so there's a lot of stuff there. But the particulars of the crime that I committed, the actual SBA loan fraud, were not that particularly interesting until now. And the thing is about being someone who's been prosecuted or incarcerated for white collar crime is, as you know, and most of our listeners probably understand, there's not a lot of empathy. There's not a lot of compassion. I've been socially distanced from the world for 20 years. And so have a lot of people we know. So living in this kind of isolation is not really new. The thing that is new is that we've been trying to find universal themes that we can bring to the public at large for a long time now, certainly as long as I've known you. That's 7 or 8 years now, more probably, 9 years, I think. And a lot of people don't want to accept or understand the themes that we have to offer, themes about suffering, or themes about overcoming obstacles, or how to just do the right thing, or what the consequences are for not doing the right thing. But now we're in a situation where not only are there hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars worth of federal loans and other programs going to be out there, but the feds themselves predict that there's going to be over $100 billion worth of fraud. And when you have literally trillions of dollars worth of money in terms of all kinds of different programs, their position is that they can't slow down enough in order to worry about or detect the fraud. They basically have to take everybody on their word. So these applications are out there, and there's no question that in order to get a SBA loan, you have to fill out the applications and you have to fill in the right information. And they take all available collateral, whatever that happens to be, and this is exactly what happened post 9/11 when I got into trouble. What happened for me was that I was at the tail end of a 10-year addiction to prescription opioids, and I was desperate, and my law firm was already going down the drain, mostly because of my opioid use. And so when I saw a lifeline come to prop up my law firm, even though I was in massive denial because I was going to lose my law firm under any circumstances, I saw this lifeline come up and I grabbed it. And what I did was I lied on the loan application because I wanted the money. And there was really nobody to tell me not to. Not that I'm not blaming anyone else but myself, but there was just not any good information about there. There wasn't the internet like the way there is now. There weren't anybody who'd come along before me who had gone through these issues. But since there's been Katrina fraud, there's been Superstorm Sandy fraud, there's been all kinds of other fraud where FEMA and the SBA have tried to do the right thing by propping up people's businesses and providing low interest loans. And now it's happening again, even on a larger scale. And we know that people are going to wander into these problems in a really big way. And whether it be intentional or unintentional, because they just aren't paying attention to the particular amount of detail that they need, or understanding that if you say the wrong thing and then you later default, or you say the wrong thing, even if you don't default, you could wind up being prosecuted just like I was, and just like tens of thousands of people were after all these other disasters. So here I am.
So you have a sense that, so you're sounding an alarm, one, to people who are maybe feeling desperate and close to what you were in your situation, to think twice about this, and to sort of just be mindful of the federal involvement, because they're loaning out this money, but they're not totally blind. I mean, they will pay attention on not maybe the front end, but on the back end, they will be paying attention.
Well, unless you qualify for one of these loans where the PPP loans, where they forgive part of the debt, if you use the money in a certain way, let's say to pay your employees or pay your rent, other than that, these are loans. They have to be repaid back, and they have to be repaid. And granted, they're long-term, and granted, they are low interest, and it's money at just the right time where it needs to come into the community and into small businesses in order to prop them up. And I think that's a good thing. And most people who take these loans will qualify, and they'll be able to get their paperwork in order. But the outliers, the people who will either do the wrong thing or wander into trouble, are still in the tens of thousands of people. And so that's why I wrote this blog that's currently running on prisonist.org, but it's been reprinted already in a few different places. Like our friend Beatrice Codiani was wonderful enough to put it on Reentry Central a couple of days ago, and it's running in a few other places.
I'm waiting for you to send it to me so I could run it in the inner city.
I did send it to you already.
Did you? I don't remember getting it, because I would have run it a long time ago.
No. I sent it to you. I sent it to you. No, we definitely want you running it in the inner city, because this doesn't really even apply just to people who identify themselves as white collar or anything else. I mean, this can make a white collar criminal out of anybody. And I mean, let's face it. I mean, the definition of white collar criminal, as much as I hate that term, is someone who's engaged in occupational or economic crime. And the thing is that the forms that they're asking people, well, here's some more backstory. So I knew this was happening, and it felt just so close to my experience that I was starting to get that uneasy, queasy feeling, and I was having.
I was wondering, like, how all of this came. Like, when did it start triggering you to feel all of this? The moment that you heard it, or you saw it sort of coming over the horizon?
Oh, well, I would say I felt it a little bit right when I first started hearing it on the news at Katrina, and I started hearing it at Sandy. And then all of a sudden there were stimulus packages, and they start talking on the news about SBA loan money. Now, it just so happens that a few months ago, I spoke at an SBA conference at Fairfield University, and they invited me to speak. And I was on a panel, and while I was on that panel, I got to tell my SBA related story for the first time ever. And it seemed the right thing to do, because I've made my amends and I've paid my restitution, and I've come to terms with the fact that the SBA, the Small Business Administration, they did the right thing. I mean, they provided me and a lot of other people money at a time where we desperately needed it. So they did their job. The problem I had was that I couldn't keep it together. I was so drug addled, and I was so desperate, and I was so really crazy from all those years of drugs that I did things I never would have let one of my clients do. And so I lied. And I wasn't induced into lying. I just had no ability to perceive what the consequences would be for playing fast and loose with the truth. I mean, the bottom line was I needed the money, and I needed it right then, or so I thought. Mm-hmm. So I told this story at this SBA conference, because they were, at the time, they were going around the country talking about what the SBA could do to add value to all kinds of different issues, including issues of starting startups and small businesses. And I don't think they had any idea how topical it was going to become, because this is pre-coronavirus. After I told that, I was contacted by the SBA, and I was asked if I would become one of their speakers, and I would help them tell the story, because there's almost nobody who was willing to disclose the fact that they did the wrong thing and what the consequences were. So I was already in that head, and I had been speaking to people at the SBA when this all happened. So as soon as it happened, and it came on my radar, Babz, I'm telling you, I started to feel sick. You know, I felt that it wasn't just the hysterical thing from what happened to me. I just said, oh my God, there's going to be so many people who are going to wander into this problem, and they're going to do it unknowingly. They're not going to understand. Because if you go, so what happens, I started to take a couple of webinars by well-meaning business consulting companies. I'm not going to tell you who they are. And because I wanted to see, like, what kind of information is out there. Mm-hmm. And they were telling people to get their SBA applications in, and don't worry about whether or not you actually need the money. And don't worry about whether or not what you put on the application is accurate or not. Just if
I've heard some of that, Jeff. Like I've heard a little bit of that. I've seen that explored.
Yeah, because what the suggestion was, get your application into the queue, because if you don't do it fast,
Yes.
then they might run out of money, which we know happened. And now it's been refunded, I guess, or I don't know if the president signed the legislation yet, but the House and the Senate have passed the bills for the second tranche of SBA money. So I'm hearing from these consulting companies that don't worry about telling the truth, just get it in. You can always change your application before you accept the money. That was what they said. And I was thinking, if your business is failing and you can't pay your bills and you have an application in and it's been approved, what percentage of people are likely to change their application and slow it down before they get the money? It would put them at the end of the line again, or it would potentially throw their application into a whole different phase. So I said, I'm thinking that's terrible advice, but it's terrible advice. So I sat down to write this blog, which is running on prisonist.org, which is our.
And you've got 7, and you pull out 7 things.
Yeah, 7 things. 7 things.
And desperation is the first thing that you talk about, which is what you're talking about. Desperate people do desperate things.
Yeah, but it's like, I can understand if you're in a motorcycle accident and you have a huge gash and you're going to lose your limb, you get to the hospital, but you have to gauge, how sick or how hurt someone is. And in this particular case, if it's just a Band-Aid that you're going to put on, that's going to be good for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months of bills, but there's no way that your business is going to survive, then take a step back, because if you've borrowed that money and you've had to pledge your house or pledge other assets of yours or have your spouse sign a guarantee for the loan, why would you do that just so that 3 months later or 6 months later you default and lose potentially your home as well, or that 2 years later, if you haven't quite told the truth, you'd be prosecuted for fraud? So just take a step back. Like, what does my business really need? What's the likelihood of its success? And I don't think people are looking at that, because everybody's in dreamland. Everybody's desperate.
I think you make a good point, Jeff. I think that's a level of truth telling that people in business can't get to when they're in these desperate moments.
Yeah,
because the American dream tells you that this is the dream, that this is the path to success.
Look, I know for me that my business was in the process of failing for 2 years before I applied for this loan. And that's because of all the kinds of crazy things I was doing while I was on these prescription narcotics. I was on, I had invaded client escrow funds. I was being investigated by the grievance committee. I was going to lose my law license. But somehow it was a good idea to borrow almost $250,000 from the federal government to prop up a business that was going to fail anyway. I was in complete denial, as I believe that many other people are in denial right now. And so that was number one. That was number one. Number two, the misplaced belief that the rules are suspended in times of emergency. We kind of talked about that already. The rules aren't suspended. The rules still apply. You have to be honest. You have to tell the truth. And sometimes it comes up in weird ways. Like in this particular case, for an SBA loan, anybody who has a 20% interest in the business or more has to fill out the application and provide financials. But sometimes these companies have strange interlocking ownerships, and one business owns pieces of other businesses that own other pieces of businesses. And those other people may not want to make those disclosures. They may not even be in favor of the loan. So someone who's filling out this application, when you're filling it out online, there's not necessarily enough of a blank to be able to describe the complex way in which this business is owned, or to provide the kind of information they want. So all too often, what people do is, okay, well, I just will avoid that, or I won't answer that, or I'll give an answer that's kind of good enough. But if you get prosecuted 2 years from now, they're going to look really carefully at whether or not you filled it out completely and you told the absolute truth. And if you fudged a little, that could be enough. So my advice there, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I can't give legal advice, this is just from my experience, is tell the truth and turn the outcome over to God. Either you'll get the loan or you won't get the loan. But if you don't tell the truth and you get the loan, some harsh things can happen. That's number two.
Yes. So number three, magical thinking, entrepreneurs beware. Now I want you to talk about this because I'm very interested in what you wrote about this.
Well, I'm super interested in this because a few years ago, a friend of ours, Tim Askew, wrote a column for Inc. magazine that I happened to be interviewed for. And if I'm interviewed for something, it usually means that something is wacky, right? And really, and the topic was how closely related entrepreneurial thinking and criminal thinking are.
Oh.
And you can understand why entrepreneurs get into trouble, because they're willing to take risks that other people aren't willing to take. Most small business or startup entrepreneurs, they don't have access to a lot of the things that larger businesses are, like they don't have compliance departments. They can't call up their lawyers with the same kind of, or they don't have in-house lawyers, and they don't have the ability to check things out the same way. They're kind of in the risk-taking business. And now it's a time of trauma, like the world is going through right now. Or my God, my business is going to fail, and I'm in trauma. Or I have friends or family that's sick, or I'm worried if I'm sick. The whole world's in trauma, but they're still relying on that same thinking, that same entrepreneurial thinking, and that kind of thinking, when you're in trauma, can get you into a lot of trouble. So to me, the right answer is not to just grab for something that's going to be a quick fix, but get back to basics. I mean, presumably you have some form of business plan, and that you need to adapt. I mean, what's my way out of this problem? What do I need to do to get through this problem, and what are the steps, and what resources do I need to bring to bear? And granted, this loan might be part of that solution, but it also might not be part of that solution. And if you don't have a good plan put together, then it's just throwing money at a problem. What it's not doing is it's not part of an integrated plan. Do I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs who go through that every day? Yes. Do I think that they're playing it that close to the edge where a few misrepresentations or misguided attempts at trying to solve my business and use government money could get me into trouble? Here's where we are right now in the world. So I think entrepreneurs are particularly, or people who view themselves as entrepreneurs are particularly at risk right now.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That's a very good point. So
we can go number 4.
Number 4, the paradigm shift affects all small and mid-sized businesses.
Yeah. Here's the thing. So many small, mid-sized businesses already had issues. Like I know so many people, for example, who've resisted going online and having a robust online presence, or getting into the kind of new ways of doing business. And little by little by little, their business is dissipating. They're losing it to Amazon. They're losing it to the competitor across the street. They're, for example, I had a friend who, this is going back 20, 25 years. He was a color separator. You know what color separating is?
No.
In the old days, what a color separator was is that in order to make an advertisement or a poster or an ad in the paper or anything or an album cover, you'd have 4 sheets of acetate, of actual plastic acetate, one in blue, one in red, one in yellow, and one in black. And you put them all together, and by putting the 4 sheets together, it would make a picture. It would make a picture. And they were big in the color separation business, in the acetate business. Now with Photoshop or whatever you do online, that business is done. That business has been over for 20 years. It's gone. It's like tool and die businesses. 3D printing is putting tool and die businesses out of business. The digital watch business almost put the mechanical watch industry out of business. And so many people, they haven't kept up with the times, and now their businesses were failing, or they were dissipating, or that insidious drip, drip, drip of losing business a little at a time, and they were just kind of ignoring it or sticking their head in the sand. And now all of a sudden this flood of money becomes available, and they say, Eureka, I found my solution.
Yes, but and it's a false solution.
It's a false solution. And that's not to say that good, strong businesses with strong fundamentals shouldn't be borrowing the money. But again, it's another thing of taking a good hard look and being honest, or going to consultants, or even, it's hard to look at yourself. It's hard. If I was able to look at myself, I'd push the bowl of pasta away. It's hard.
So, borrowing from the government.
Oh, number 5. Good
idea, bad idea, decent idea, necessary idea.
Look, I don't think that borrowing from the government is any different than borrowing from any other institution, other than the fact that perhaps the penalties can be more direct and swifter. In any loan, you have to read the covenants carefully. You have to look at the loan documents, and those covenants dictate. If you watch CNBC now, they're talking about debt, and they're talking about companies that are trying to save themselves, and people who've taken out covenant loans. If the stock, for example, dips below a certain price, it triggers certain events. And it's all the particulars of the loan, of the language in the loan documents. For me, I did 2 things that were wrong. One, not only did I lie on the application, but the second thing I did wrong was I had run up my credit cards to a lot of money trying to save my business, and waiting for the loan proceeds to fund. So and these credit cards, I don't remember, but they were probably like 24% interest.
Whoa.
So as soon as I got the loan money, the SBA money, I paid back my credit cards, because the SBA money, I don't know, was it 3% or 4%? And the credit cards were 24% or something like that. And it made good business sense to pay off the credit cards. But in the terms of the SBA loan agreement, I wasn't allowed to take money and pay off personal credit card debts. The money was earmarked for operating expenses of the business. Now, the crazy part is, Babz, all I really probably had to do was segregate that money, use it for operating, and then new money that came into the business from operating, I probably could have paid off my credit cards. But not me. I was in this mad dash. I mean, I literally paid off those credit cards the same day that the loan funded. I was manic. There was nothing I could do faster. than to get rid of that 24% interest. And I didn't even wait. And I knew better. I was a lawyer. It was crazy. And I don't think that people are, I think there is a certain percentage of people who are going to try to, well, we get to number 6 now. We can't save our businesses and our lifestyles at the same time.
Oh, please talk about that. That's interesting. That's a very interesting perspective.
You see, the thing is that whenever I meet someone who has a new business or has a new business idea or a startup business, when I meet them, and it could be anything. It could be a bakery on Whaley Avenue. It could be, I know you love that vegan bakery over there. Or it could be anything. It could be an internet startup. It could be anything. If they're living in a garage, or they're living in their parents' house and they're applying all their proceeds and all their money to the business, and they're trying to get something started, all their time, all their energy, it's like on watching Shark Tank. They're looking to see the level of commitment that people have. So if their money's going towards the business, then this makes sense. There's a limited amount of money, but so many people will just take money out of a business to support a lifestyle that they've created, mortgages, cars, school tuitions, whatever it is. And so they're not really letting the business pay them what the business can afford to pay. What they're doing is they're setting a lifestyle for themselves, and then they're trying to make the business catch up with it. Well, here we are now where a business is now hurt or potentially failing because of in many reasons, for many people, circumstances beyond their control. I mean, it's just in some ways bad luck that the business is in a place where there's this huge problem that is affecting the business. But what they don't want to do is they don't want to cut down on their lifestyle. They don't want to sell their house. They don't want to get rid of their cars. They don't want to go through the pain it takes. And so instead of applying the money to the business, which is their lifeblood, which is the thing long-term will take care of them, what they do is they want to take the money and they want to pay off, and they want to pay what they view as immediate problems in their personal lifestyle. And chances are there's not enough money to do both. And certainly if you're borrowing the money, you can't do both because the money is not supposed to prop up your lifestyle. And the smart people are gonna be on the straight and narrow, and they're gonna figure out that the business has got to come first. And you got to be willing to say no. You got to say no to your wife. You got to say no to your husband. You got to say no to your kids. You got to say no to your great Aunt Tilly, who might need to borrow money, whoever it is. And this money's for the business. But we know a lot of people aren't going to do that. And I know because I didn't do it. And I'm no different than most people. I was desperate, and people are desperate out there right now. The other thing that they're not going to do is they're not going to go get good, solid advice from people who will tell them the truth. I mean, one of the reasons I love you, Babz, one of the thousands of reasons I love you.
One of thousands, millions.
One of the thousands of reasons I love you is that when I do something stupid, you call me on it in about 4 seconds. In fact, we could be in the middle of a show and you're right. We could be in the middle of a show and you'll text me and you'll say, "What is this BS?" True? True or not? Does this happen? Right? Like,
very true.
Right? And I need that in my life because I'm going through a mental exercise of the way I think things should be. Now, the reason why I believe you and I get along so well is that I always have your best interest at heart.
Absolutely.
I am in your corner 100%. And even when I'm just doing things that are good for the show or good for whatever, I'm not filling you in on real time. We can't talk every minute of the day, but you trust me and I trust you. But
Absolutely.
but sometimes I wander over the line into stupidity. Right? Let's face it, right? Right? And it's like it could be in the middle of the show, and the thing will ring up. Oh my God, did I do that again?
But you know what? That's authentic friendship and love. Because
Right.
Because we've already we know what it's like, Jeff, to have people blow smoke up our butts.
But what good is that if I'm not telling you the truth?
Right.
If I'm lying to you or lying to myself or lying to you, then all you can do is after the fact say, well, that was stupid, right? You want to have friends and people in your corner who you're telling the truth to, so they can hopefully help you avoid going up on the rocks.
Right.
Right? That would be nice. And here is a situation where people are borrowing tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they have an idea in their mind, which might be really misconstructed. And so my advice here is go to people who you trust, who you're going to tell the truth to. You know, it's like going to the.
You don't want to hear it, even if it's painful, even if it's hard, even if it breaks your heart, even if it says that, you know what, you really have to think about this business and the closing of this, or the letting go, or the letting this die, or whatever it is. I think that's very difficult for people because it's your dream and your life and your goal. And
I can tell you how many times something's going on with me and I know I have to go to the doctor, right? But I'm lying to myself. I'm thinking, oh, it'll get better, or I don't want to go, or even if I get to the doctor, I don't tell them the truth about what's going on. Crazy, crazy, crazy thinking. And then so a problem does not have to grow to catastrophic if there's ways to avoid it in advance. So this is just one of those areas right now where if what we're thinking about doing is saving our lifestyle and not our business, you need to be able to go to people who are sober and friends or you trust and tell them what you're planning on doing and let them reel you in. For me at the time, it was obvious I was doing the wrong thing. The only one who couldn't see it was me. And because I didn't have any friends. I was isolated. That's the way drug addicts are. And I didn't even know really, well, I probably knew by that point that I had been, I was addicted to prescription narcotics, but I knew that doctors were prescribing them, so they must have been okay. And it's crazy thinking. So that's number 6.
So through all of this, you get to acceptance. For some of us, our business will not get better despite a financial infusion. What should we do? Pare down, embrace change, and do things differently. Look forward to a new, fuller, more abundant life.
Here's the crazy thing.
Sometimes less is way more.
Yeah. You like that? Lynn put that last piece in.
I love that.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think that the whole world now, or at least the people that I know, or people online, because I'm on a lot of Zoom recovery meetings and Zoom spiritual meetings, and I read a lot of articles, and people are finding kind of the silver lining in this. Not everybody, certainly, and it's awfully hard if you're starving or if you're on one of these food lines. I mean, there's a lot of pain right now, but at the same time, people are getting to be with their children that they haven't seen for decades, maybe, and there's a revaluing of things and a readjustment, and it makes sense to look at things differently. What's the gift in this? What's the silver lining in it? But if I'm willing to overlook the gifts in it because I so desperately want to get my business back or save my business, or and I want to overlook the last 6 things that you and I talked about. What it doesn't jive with the other pieces of learning that we're having. People are learning that less is more. People are learning right now that maybe a simple life is better than a complicated life. Maybe it's better to not be putting 16-hour days in, and to be paying more attention to our children, and to be more invested in their futures, and to look at your spouse and kind of remember the relationships that you had when you first got together, and that you've kind of ignored for the last decade or so while you've been in this desperate quest to make money. And people are feeling this now. And I'm not saying everybody, and people are doing it in varying degrees, but this can come into even to the equation of whether or not it makes sense to borrow money, or the amount of emotional energy that you put into that. Because maybe you're not going to get the loan. Maybe you can do everything right and they run out of money, and you're the last person online before they run out of money, and they said you're sorry, they pull the window down, no more money. What are you going to do? Well, what are you going to do? And the answer, I think, is that, wait, I was at places in my life, and so were you, Babz, because we've obviously shared a lot. We were places in life that there was no way for us to see our way out.
Yes.
No way. It was impossible. It was black. Right? It was darkness. And there was no way to see our way out. So what did we do? One step at a time, and then the next step, and then the next step. And through this serpentine path, you wake up a year later, or you wake up 5 years later, and life is nothing like it was before. And that's the gift of just doing the next right thing and turning the outcome over to God, or whatever you believe in. But yet, I'm forced with this value system right now. If I allow myself, either this loan is going to save me, or I'm not going to be saved.
Whoa, that's right? That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot.
There's people thinking that.
Yes.
And so it doesn't make a difference if their second grader and their fourth grader you're now getting to hug them and you're getting to spend time with them. They're obsessing about money still. And my advice is not, I don't mean to be disrespectful or unsympathetic or uncaring to anybody who's starving out there. That's not the point. The point is that if this conversation is about borrowing money to save yourself or save your business, that look at the richness of this moment. This may be the great correction that our society needed. I don't want to get too philosophical, biblical, but you're a minister, Babz, and you're a churchgoer, and this may be what the Jubilee actually looks like, where the prisoners are set free and the debts are forgiven. This might be the Jubilee. And
I will say this, it will be for some.
For some. And how arrogant of us to even believe that we would know what the Lord's Jubilee looks like. The last thing in the world I know is the mysterious ways in which the Lord works. Right? So all of a sudden, I think I know what's good or bad or right or wrong for me or for anyone else. So I'm just suggesting that as a lot of people are suggesting, that this is a time to really be able to remeasure what's important. And certainly that one of those things is that it's not all or nothing. It's not get a loan or doomed. that there's a lot of other things. And there's a lot of people who've been in all kinds of suffering situations, disease, incarceration, divorce, death of a child, a mental illness, drug addiction, all kinds of things, who have to find their way through these issues every day. Just because we have this community trauma now of mythic proportion doesn't mean that it doesn't narrow down to what's going on in my house and in my world, and how do I cope, and how do I do the best I can given the limited resources I have. And usually what that means is controlling my attitude and helping others. But that's true every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's true every single day. There's not a day that has gone by in the last 20 years where, at least since I got knocked down and knocked off my high horse as a big shot lawyer, right, where I haven't had to face that issue every single day. And so here I am now, and I have some sobriety under my belt, and I have the ability to share some of these things I've learned with other people. And what a gift. What a gift that after all this time, I actually have not just something to add that people need, because I think I've had that for a long time, as you've had that certainly. But now I have something that people will pay attention to. I'm not just that white collar criminal who they want to shove in a corner. I'm someone who has actual on the ground experience of what it is to take out an SBA loan and for it to go wrong because I didn't follow the right steps. And hopefully what it means is that that you can follow the right steps in thinking about this and in actually applying the right way, and then applying the proceeds when you get them.
This has been a good masterclass.
Not too bad.
It's been a good masterclass, Jeff Grant. Seriously.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna listen to this and be lifted, and a light bulb is gonna go off, or they'll have an epiphany, or they will reevaluate where they are in this moment.
I'm hoping, right? I'm hoping.
And
you know that's something you and I try to do every time we have a Criminal Justice Insider.
Yes.
So we can do a plug for Criminal Justice Insider. First and third.
Harry cues up the music.
First and third Friday of every month, Criminal Justice Insider. If you want to reach me, it's at prisonist.org, like prisonist, like feminist, prisonist, and jgrant at prisonist.org. And I'd be happy to help in any way I can, on any level I can. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice.
But I can give you real world advice on how I made it through.
The real deal.
The real deal. Thank you, Jeff Grant.
Love you, Babz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on your show.
I needed this for my spirit today, so thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Harry.
Give it a little shimmy.